Out of 40,000 applicants last year for Harvard, 8,000 of them had perfect grades from 9th to 12th, right? They also had 3,500 with perfect scores on their SAT reading portions. So what does that mean? How can, when you are looking for a class of 2,000, you be focused only on grades? There has to be another method for AdCom to decide who it is that gets into their class. In fact, for all of these top schools, they say almost 60% of students actually passed the academic criteria. And what that means is that if they have 40,000 applicants, then imagine if 25,000 of them have the grades to get in. Now, how do you go from 25,000 to 2,000, right? That's where the trick lies in all of this. Hi, so welcome back. I'm Tina Chulette, and I'm here with Blue Skies. We are trying to basically get to the bottom of how you can be memorable so that you get admitted, okay? So first off the bat, spoiler alert, there is no correct way to get into Harvard. Basically, Harvard doesn't have a prescribed method, nor does MIT, nor does Stanford. They want you to basically follow whatever it is that you think you're good at. These schools want a collectively diverse body, and that's why they look for so many different skills. They're looking for the best musician, the best dancer, the best academic, the most interested in cancer, and so on, right? So just chase what you love. Just chase that with everything that you've got, okay? First and foremost, this is an academic exercise, all right? If you don't pass the bar for academics, you don't even get a chance for them to look at the rest of your application. 4 years of consistent grades, and we're gonna go into that in a little bit more detail later on of exactly what does it mean to have good academics, is a precursor to even getting started on your extracurriculars. Think about it. Out of 40,000 applicants last year for Harvard, 8,000 of them had perfect grades from 9th to 12th, right? They also had 3,500 with perfect scores on their SAT reading portions. So what does that mean? How can, when you are looking for a class of 2,000, you be focused only on grades? There has to be another method for AdCom to decide who it is that gets into their class. In fact, for all of these top schools, they say almost 60% of students actually passed the academic criteria. And what that means is that if they have 40,000 applicants, then imagine if 25,000 of them have the grades to get in. Now, how do you go from 25,000 to 2,000, right? That's where the trick lies in all of this. Once you basically pass the academic filter, then it's basically about your rest of your application, right? So that's gonna be your extracurriculars, your leadership, your interviews, your teacher recommendations, and so on, right? So remember, first, academic performance, once you pass that, the entire criteria slightly changes so that there's a lot more focus on everything else that makes you a human being. So in the United States, one thing that's very different is they do something called a holistic review. And basically what it is, they believe that past is a great indicator of future, right? So if you were somebody who in the past showed that you were singularly passionate about something, who had great relationships with their professors and teachers, then it is likely that's gonna happen in the future, right? They also care that you're gonna be a great human being, because if you're only about academics sitting in a back row, what does that really contribute to society? Although it's not that you can't have a role in society, but of course, if you're somebody who gives back to the community, you will give back to their school, and hopefully when you're successful, you'll be giving back to the community and society at large, and that's what their true indicator of success really is about. So when we look at what the holistic review is, there's a few criteria. The first is academics, extracurriculars, your personal statement, your demographics, your school support or your letter of recommendations, and your personal qualities. Are you funny, humorous, and so on. Okay, so let's go back to the process. So the process is generally the same everywhere. They will first take 1 to 2 minutes to basically look through your basic academics and your application and make a few notes. They will decide after that whether or not they want to spend an additional 4 to 8 minutes looking at the rest of your application. Let's say there's 2 readers on each application. If the 2 readers are on the same page, then they basically can agree and they have a decision. If the 2 readers are not in agreement with how they feel the student fits in, then what happens is it generally goes into a larger committee, and this committee then takes a role where your reader who loves you needs to stand up and say, this is why I think this person should be admitted, right? In general, they take about 4 to 10 minutes on your entire application. Yes, the application that you are spending hours and hours on is going to be reviewed in 4 to 10 minutes, and that's why being memorable in that short period of time is so critical for you. So there's basically 4 buckets. Bucket 1 would be likely to be accepted, right? Bucket 2 is a toss-up. Bucket 3 is likely to be rejected, and something called LMO, and bucket 4 is basically almost certainly to be rejected, okay? Bucket 1, accepted, easy. Bucket 2, toss up. This is the one that goes to the larger committee where they try to get a consensus about you and your profile. The third one is the most interesting. So that is called the LMO, likely to be rejected. LMO stands for like many others. And basically what they're saying is that it's not that you've not been awesome or had a lot of achievements or achieved the grades, but the problem is they can't figure out what makes you different than everybody else. And so you're just one of many others that they've seen, right? And so we don't want to be in that bucket. That's what we will talk about as we go forward. And of course, you know what the last one is, rejection, right? Let's talk a little bit more about the Harvard process, okay? So Harvard does it very similarly to what I explained. One thing that's very interesting is in the initial sort of look that they have about your core demographics. They look at whether or not you're a legacy student, which means that your parents or your sister or brother have previously gone there. They also look at whether or not you need financial aid, okay? So we will talk about that later. They'll look at your citizenship, your demographics, your race, your socioeconomic wealth, everything that you can think of, and they make notes on that before they actually go into how is your performance, okay? And then they basically are going to assign their student scores for academic, extracurricular, personal, athletic. You get a score between 1 and 6. If you get a 1, your likelihood of getting goes up about 15 times, okay? You can assume that if Harvard does it this way, the top 20 schools do it very similarly. So that's why I like to just use a benchmark so it's easy for you to understand how do people look at this overall. So let's say now they have about 3,000 students in their overall class. Now basically what they'll do is, but they only need, let's say, 2,000 students. So they look at the entire class as one. Remember I told you Harvard and every other school wants a student body that is collectively very different, right? So they will put them together and say, okay, how many people are from North Korea? How many people are from a low-income background? How many people are dancers, and so on, until they feel like they have a class that will really benefit from one another, because most people will have different skills than their peers, right? There is a lot more that you can control than you can't control. How do we control what we can control? With the final objective being, how do we stand out